My own mother deserted me at the airport when I was just 15, so she could enjoy a luxurious trip with her new husband and his kids. You can figure it out, she shrugged coldly. I did just that by calling my estranged father, who arrived for me in a private jet. When she came back, she discovered my room was empty and a legal notice was waiting. Can you imagine being 15, standing in a bustling airport, just moments away from what you think is a family vacation? Only for your own mother to hand you $200 with a casual shrug and walk away? She left me at gate 24 with her new husband and his kids, and that moment didn't just shatter my world. It ignited a search for truth that revealed a betrayal far deeper than I could have ever imagined. Trust me, you have to hear what happened when she finally came home to find my room completely empty. Looking back, my early childhood with Mom felt like a sweet, simple dream. I can still picture her pushing me high on the swings at the park, my stomach doing happy flips. For my 6th birthday, she baked a lopsided chocolate cake, and our tiny apartment was filled with handmade streamers. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that felt like everything. Then when I was 8, everything changed. I came home one day to a heavy silence, my parents stiffly perched on opposite ends of our worn couch. They told me they were getting a divorce. The explanation was vague, something about adults falling out of love, which left me with a million questions and a gaping hole in my chest. I cried myself to sleep that night, clutching my stuffed rabbit, the muffled sounds of their arguments a chilling soundtrack through my bedroom wall. Mom got primary custody and Dad just faded. Weekend visits dwindled, then calls became awkward and brief. By 10, he was little more than a name on my birth certificate, a ghost from a life I barely remembered. Life as a single-parent household wasn't easy. Mom worked 2 jobs, waitressing by day, cleaning offices by night. I got used to microwave dinners and letting myself in with a key on a string around my neck. Despite the struggles, there was a certain stability, you know. I understood the rules, I knew what was expected, and deep down, I always believed I was the center of her world. Then, when I was 13, it all shifted again. Mom met Richard at the restaurant. He was a wealthy businessman, always leaving huge tips, always asking for her section. I still remember the first time she talked about him, her cheeks flushed, describing his expensive suit and how he looked at her like she was someone special. Their romance was a whirlwind. 6 months later, he proposed with a diamond so huge it looked comical on her work-worn hand. Before I could even wrap my head around having a stepfather, we were moving into his sprawling suburban mansion, complete with a pool, a home theater, and more bathrooms than I could count. But that house came with other residents, Richard's 3 kids. Olivia, 14, a year older than me, had this perpetual look of disdain that instantly made me feel inferior. Jackson, 12, was quiet, withdrawn, barely acknowledging my existence. And Zoe, 10, was initially welcoming, but that quickly vanished once we were all under the same roof. Right away, it was obvious I didn't fit. Richard was polite but distant, his real smiles and affection reserved for his own children. Family dinners became an exercise in discomfort. They'd talk about private schools, country clubs, and vacation homes, a world utterly foreign to me. When I tried to join in, my comments about school or books were met with polite nods before the conversation swung back to their kids' tennis tournaments or debate club wins. What hurt the most was watching Mom change. The woman who'd once coupon-clipped and shopped clearance racks now spoke casually about designer brands. She colored her hair, whitened her teeth, and started referring to our old life as the struggle years, with an uncomfortable laugh whenever Richard's friends were around. It was like she was shedding her old skin, and with it, the parts of herself connected to me. I tried so hard to fit in with my new step-siblings. I offered to help Olivia with math, complimented Zoe's artwork, asked Jackson about his video games. It was always met with cool politeness at best or outright rejection. I'll never forget overhearing Olivia tell her friends on the phone that her dad's new wife came with baggage. She meant me. As summer approached, Richard announced a family vacation to Bali, 2 weeks at an exclusive resort. Despite the growing distance, a surge of excitement hit me. Maybe this was it, a chance to finally bond away from daily pressures. My hopes were crushed when Mom took the stepkids shopping for new vacation clothes, but not me. When I asked why, she casually said I had plenty of clothes already, even though most of mine were from our life before Richard. I ended up using my babysitting money to buy myself a modest blue one-piece, which paled next to the designer bikinis Olivia and Zoe flaunted. A week before the trip, I overheard a conversation that made my stomach clench. Mom and Richard in their bedroom, door slightly ajar. What about the arrangements for Blanche? Richard asked, his voice low. All taken care of, Mom replied dismissively. She won't be a problem. When I asked her about it later, she just brushed it off with a breezy, just trip details, honey. Nothing for you to worry about. The morning of our departure was pure chaos and excitement. Suitcases were loaded into Richard's luxury SUV. I noticed my passport wasn't with the travel documents on the kitchen counter, but Mom mumbled something about having it in her purse and hurried me along. Looking back, the signs were screaming. The way she avoided eye contact. No one discussing my seat on the plane, my suitcase being mysteriously smaller than everyone else's. But at 15, desperate to believe I was part of this family, I ignored those blaring warning bells. The international terminal was a swirling maze. Richard navigated the crowds expertly, Mom clutching her designer handbag at his side. Olivia, Jackson, and Zoe followed, bright with anticipation. I trailed behind, struggling with my small suitcase. At check-in, Richard handed over passports. 5, not 6. A knot formed in my stomach as I watched boarding passes being distributed to everyone but me. Excuse me, I said, stepping forward, my voice shaky. I think you forgot my boarding pass. The airline attendant looked confused. I only have 5 passengers listed for this reservation. Richard cleared his throat. Your mother needs to speak with you about that. We'll go ahead to security. As Richard and the stepchildren moved away with the luggage cart, Mom took my elbow and steered me to a quiet corner. Her face held an expression I'd never seen, a strange mix of detachment and mild annoyance. Listen, Blanche, she said, her voice unnaturally calm. There's been a change of plans. You're not coming with us to Bali. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Why? Did I do something wrong? She sighed, glancing over at Richard and the kids by security. Richard thinks this should be a trip just for us and his kids. A chance to really bond as a family. But I am family too, I protested, my voice cracking. I'm your daughter. Don't make a scene, she hissed, digging into her purse. She pulled out a wad of cash and pressed it into my hand. Here's $200, you can figure it out. Just take an Uber home. I stared at the money, disbelief warring with horror. You're leaving me at the airport? Alone? I don't even have a house key. She gave that casual shrug, the one that would haunt my dreams for years. Mrs. Peterson next door has the spare. You'll be fine. You're mature for your age. Tears welled, the full devastating reality crashing over me. Mom, please. You can't do this. Richard is waiting, she said, glancing nervously toward security. This vacation is important for our future, Blanche. Sometimes we all have to make sacrifices. A sacrifice would be giving up a concert ticket or postponing a shopping trip, I shot back, anger finally breaking through my shock. This is abandonment! She flinched but quickly composed herself. Don't be so dramatic. It's just 2 weeks. The refrigerator is stocked, and I left money for pizza in the kitchen drawer. She leaned in, planting a quick, dry kiss on my forehead. I'll call you when we land. With that, she turned and walked away, her designer heels clicking on the tile, rejoining Richard and the stepchildren. I watched, stunned, as they passed through security. My mother never once looked back. Olivia caught my eye briefly and smirked before they disappeared from view. I stood rooted, the $200 clutched in my trembling hand. Around me, the airport buzzed, travelers rushing, families hugging, announcements echoing. But for me, time stopped. The magnitude of her betrayal sank in. The tears came, hot and fast, streaming down my face as I sank onto a nearby bench. A few passers-by gave curious or concerned glances, but no one stopped. A crying teenager in an airport was just part of the landscape, easily overlooked. I spent the next hour in a daze, watching the departure board. Each update, boarding, then departed, was another twist of the knife. I called Mom's cell repeatedly, straight to voicemail. Text showed as delivered but unanswered. Having fun at the airport? I finally texted, anger momentarily overriding the hurt. Hope abandoning your child was worth the first-class upgrade. No response came, not that I expected one. By then, she'd be settling into her seat, perhaps sipping champagne next to Richard, relieved to have shed the burden of her previous life, including me. As afternoon stretched into evening, my situation grew precarious. An airport security officer approached me. Everything okay, miss? He asked, a mix of suspicion and concern. You've been here for several hours now. I'm waiting for my ride, I lied. avoiding his eyes. They got stuck in traffic. He seemed unconvinced but nodded, moving on after advising me not to leave my bag unattended. A new wave of humiliation washed over me. How could I admit my own mother had abandoned me? The words stuck, held back by shame and a lingering, stupid loyalty. As the crowds thinned and shops closed, the reality became undeniable. $200 wouldn't last long, and even if I made it home, I'd be alone for 2 weeks with no transportation and limited funds. I found myself in the airport bathroom, splashing cold water on my swollen face. The girl in the mirror, red-rimmed and haunted, was a stranger. In that moment, I understood something fundamental had broken. The invisible thread connecting me to my mother, the basic trust that she would always protect me, was irreparably severed. 6 hours had passed. I'd drifted from bench to bench, my phone battery running low, adding another layer of anxiety. Around 8 p.m., I went to an airport restaurant, ordering the cheapest thing, a side of fries to conserve my funds. The server, a woman with kind eyes and a Gloria name tag, brought my food, then paused. "You okay, honey? You look like you've been crying." I managed a grimace. "I'm fine. Just a long day." She didn't press, but a few minutes later she returned with a chocolate milkshake I hadn't ordered. "On the house," she winked. "Whatever's going on, sugar and chocolate never hurt." Her small kindness nearly broke me. I thanked her, a lump in my throat, and scrolled through my contacts, looking for anyone who might help. My options were depressingly short. Most friends from before the move had drifted, and I hadn't made many new ones. I tried 2 of Mom's old friends. One didn't reply, the other sent a brief, out-of-town message. It seemed Mom had shed her old support network as thoroughly as our old apartment. Then a name caught my eye. Dad. My heart skipped. I hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. Our last conversation was an awkward call on my 12th birthday. After that, he vanished. Mom had always implied he wasn't interested, that he had a new family. "Your father has moved on," she'd say. "Some men just aren't cut out for parenthood." I stared at his contact, my thumb hovering. What if he rejected me too? What if Mom was right? The thought of another abandonment felt unbearable. I went back to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall. I practiced what I'd say. "Hi, Dad, it's Blanche." I know it's been a while. Too casual. "Hello, this is Blanche. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm in trouble." Better, but still not right. Finally, desperation won. With trembling fingers, I pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when a deep voice answered. "Hello?" The sound of his voice, so familiar yet strange, momentarily stole my breath. "Hello, is anyone there?" he asked again. "Dad?" I finally managed, my voice small and uncertain. There was a pause. "Blanche? Is that you, sweetheart?" The concern in his voice cracked something open inside me. "Dad, I need help," I said. And then the whole story poured out. The remarriage, the move, the airport, the $200. By the end, I was barely coherent. "She left you alone at the airport?" His voice had a hard edge now, replacing the shock. "Where are you?" "Which airport?" I told him, half expecting him to offer to call social services or wire money. "Stay exactly where you are," he said firmly. "I'm coming to get you myself. It'll take about 3 hours. Can you stay safe until then?" "You're coming here?" I asked, disbelief evident. "You don't have to do that. Maybe you could just help me get home." "Blanche," he interrupted. "I'm coming to get you. Find the customer service desk for the airline your mother was flying with. Tell them your situation. I'll call ahead and make sure they take care of you until I arrive." After he hung up, I sat in the stall trying to process it. My father, who I believed wanted nothing to do with me, was dropping everything to rescue me. It felt too good to be true. A lifetime of disappointments had taught me to be wary of hope. Still, I followed his instructions, heart in my throat, approaching the customer service desk. To my surprise, the airline staff were immediately sympathetic. They escorted me to a private waiting area, brought me a sandwich and juice, and assured me they'd watch me until my father arrived. "Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think," the manager told me quietly. Parents changing plans, leaving kids to fend for themselves. The 3-hour wait was both endless and surreal. I drifted between hope, fear, and exhaustion. What if he didn't show up? What if he did but resented rescuing me? What if this was another elaborate setup for rejection? My mind replayed the few memories I had of him before the divorce. Teaching me to ride a bike, his steady hand on the seat. Reading bedtime stories, using different voices. Christmas morning when he built me a dollhouse, his face lighting up at my delight. If he had loved me, why had he disappeared? Why hadn't he fought to see me? The question swirled in my tired mind. Just as I was dozing off, a voice came over the PA. "Attention, please. Will Blanche Williams please come to the information desk?" "Blanche Williams to the information desk, please." My heart leapt. I grabbed my small suitcase and followed an airline employee through corridors and security checkpoints until we reached what looked like a private terminal. "Your father has arranged for you to meet him here," she explained, as we approached glass doors leading to the tarmac. That's when I saw it. A sleek private jet, stairs descending. And walking down those stairs was a tall man in a business suit, his familiar profile catching my breath. Dad looked different. His dark hair was streaked with silver, and he carried himself with a confidence I didn't remember. But his eyes, when they found mine, were exactly as I remembered. Kind, crinkled at the corners. For a moment we froze, taking each other in. Then he strode forward, closing the gap in seconds. He stopped just short of embracing me, uncertainty etched across his features. "Blanche," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe it's really you." I didn't know what to say or do. Part of me wanted to throw myself into his arms like the little girl who used to greet him at the door. Another part, the wounded teenager abandoned by both parents, held back. He seemed to sense my hesitation. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "For everything. For not being there. For not fighting harder to stay in your life." Something in his sincerity broke through my defenses. The tears I thought were exhausted hours ago returned with new force. "She said you didn't want to see me anymore," I choked out. "That you had moved on." His face darkened. "That was never true. Not for a single day." He tentatively opened his arms, and this time I didn't hesitate, stepping into his embrace and letting out years of pent-up grief against his shoulder. We stood like that for several minutes, both overcome. When we finally separated, he kept an arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward the waiting plane. "Let's get you out of here," he said gently. "We can talk properly once we're in the air." The interior of the private jet was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Plush leather seats, polished wood, soft lighting. A flight attendant greeted us warmly. As we settled into seats facing each other, I couldn't help but stare. "Is this your plane?" He smiled, a hint of embarrassment. "It's the company's, technically. I'm the CEO of Horizon Tech now." "CEO?" I echoed, disbelieving. Mom had always described him as struggling financially, barely able to make child support. "It's been a successful few years," he said simply, then leaned forward, his expression serious. "Blanche, I need you to know something. I've been trying to contact you for years. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, phone calls. When your mother remarried and moved, I lost track of you completely. I hired private investigators who couldn't find your new address. I filed motions with the court that were somehow lost or delayed. My mind reeled. She kept you away from me. On purpose." He nodded, pain in his eyes. "I've been sending child support and additional money every month since the divorce. Money you never saw, I take it?" I thought of the secondhand clothes, the ramen noodles, Mom's constant complaints about money. "We were always broke," I whispered. "She said you barely paid child support." My father opened his briefcase and removed a folder. Inside were copies of cashed checks, court documents, records of attempted communications, all neatly organized. The evidence of his efforts and my mother's deception was overwhelming. "I don't show you this to hurt you," he said gently, "but you deserve to know the truth." As the plane took off, carrying me away from the airport where Mom had abandoned me, I felt strangely weightless, like I was shedding years of misunderstandings and manipulations with each mile. Dad explained he lived in Seattle now, running the tech company he'd helped found after the divorce. What started as a small startup had become a major player, bringing him success he never anticipated. "I kept your room ready," he said, a touch of embarrassment. "All these years, just in case." The flight passed quickly as we began the delicate process of getting to know each other again. There were awkward pauses, moments of overwhelming emotion, but underneath it all, a current of genuine connection that felt both new and familiar. When we landed, a car was waiting. I pressed my face to the window as we drove through upscale neighborhoods, turning onto a private drive that wound up a hillside. The house that came into view took my breath away. A modern structure of glass and stone perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Home sweet home, Dad said, watching my reaction with a mix of pride and nervousness. I hope you'll be comfortable here. A woman named Linda greeted us at the door. I tensed, wondering if she was his wife, but he quickly introduced her as his executive assistant who'd helped prepare for my arrival. I've set up the blue bedroom for Blanche, she told him. Fresh towels in the ensuite, and I stocked the kitchen. The security team has been updated. After he thanked her, she departed with a warm smile. He gave me a tour, each room more beautiful than the last. When we reached my bedroom, I stopped short, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness. The room was painted a soft blue, with large windows overlooking the water. A plush queen-sized bed, a desk, a bookshelf, a comfy reading chair. But what caught my eye was the collection on the dresser. Are those... I moved closer, unable to finish the question. My father nodded, his expression tender. Birthday and Christmas presents. Every year since I lost contact. I couldn't deliver them, but I couldn't bear not to buy them either. Arranged chronologically were gifts appropriate for each age, still in their original wrapping. Beside them, a photo album labeled Blanche. With trembling hands, I opened it to find the few photos he'd collected of me growing up. School pictures Mom must have sent. A newspaper clipping of me getting an award. A blurry photo from a distance of me leaving my old school. You really did try to stay in my life, I whispered, the reality finally sinking in. Every single day, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. And I'm not going anywhere now if you'll let me be your dad again. That first night, we shared a meal from a local restaurant. Neither of us was quite ready to cook. The conversation flowed more easily as exhaustion lowered my guard and food restored my energy. For the first time in years, I felt seen and heard, my thoughts and feelings given value. As I finally crawled into the impossibly soft bed, emotional and physical exhaustion overtook me. My last conscious thought before drifting off was that perhaps being abandoned at the airport wasn't the ending I had feared, but rather the beginning I had always needed. I awoke the next morning, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar softness of the bed and the sound of waves. Then, the events of the previous day rushed back. I sat up, taking in my new surroundings in the clear light of morning. The room was even more beautiful. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting patterns on the pale blue carpet. I ran my fingers over the duvet, marveling at the contrast with my old life. After showering in the ensuite, with its rainfall showerhead and more toiletries than I'd ever owned, I dressed in yesterday's clothes and ventured downstairs. I found Dad in the kitchen, attempting pancakes with limited success. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a sheepish smile, gesturing to the misshapen pancake in the pan. "I thought I'd make breakfast, but my cooking skills haven't improved since you were little." A memory surfaced. Sunday mornings, his oddly shaped, sometimes burned pancakes, served with such pride. "I remember your pancakes," I said, sliding onto a stool. "You used to make smiley faces with chocolate chips." His face lit up. "You remember that? You were so young." "Some things stick with you," I replied, accepting the plate. Despite their appearance, the pancakes tasted good, and the normalcy of sharing breakfast helped ease the awkwardness. After we ate, Dad gave me a proper tour. Expansive gardens leading to a private beach, a home gym, a theater room, an office with views that would make concentration impossible. "I have some people I'd like you to meet today," he said, "if you feel up to it." An hour later, I was sitting across from Judith Bennett, a distinguished family law attorney. "What your mother did constitutes abandonment under the law," she explained, her tone professional but kind. "Leaving a minor without proper care arrangements is illegal. Additionally, there appears to be financial misconduct regarding the child support payments your father has been making." I shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to get my mom in trouble." "You just want to be safe and secure," Judith finished for me. "I understand, but we need to establish legal protection for you, especially if you wish to remain with your father." Dad, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward. "Blanche, the choice is ultimately yours, but I want you to know that I'm prepared to seek full custody if that's what you want." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "Can I really choose?" "You're 15, Judith said. "The court gives significant weight to the preferences of children your age, especially in cases involving abandonment or neglect." After the attorney left, Dad showed me his office, where he'd meticulously documented every attempt to maintain contact. Copies of court filings, records of unanswered calls to Mom, even emails to my old school that never reached me. She threatened legal action if I tried to contact you directly, he explained, showing me a letter from Mom's attorney from 3 years ago. She claimed I was harassing her and causing you emotional distress. Each revelation was another piece of the puzzle, completing a picture of deliberate separation that made my heart ache. Why would she do this? Just to keep you away from me? Blanche, Dad said, I think it was more complicated. After the divorce, your mother struggled financially, which was partly my fault. I hadn't yet achieved success. I think when the company took off and my financial situation improved dramatically, it was easier for her to maintain the narrative that I was uninvolved than to explain why she had kept us apart. 2 days after my arrival, as I was settling into a tentative routine, my mother finally called. I stared at her name on my phone, a maelstrom of emotions paralyzing me. You don't have to answer, Dad said gently. After 4 rings, it went to voicemail. A minute later, a notification. She'd left a message. With trembling fingers, I pressed play, putting the phone on speaker. Blanche, honey, there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding. Mom's voice falsely bright. I thought you understood the plan was for you to stay home during our trip. Richard felt it would be good for you to have some independence, and I agreed. I didn't abandon you, sweetie. That's such a harsh word. Call me back so we can clear this up. The resort Wi-Fi is spotty, but I'll try to check my messages. Love you. The blatant rewriting of reality made my stomach churn. There had been no plan for me to stay home. No discussion of independence. She had abandoned me without warning and was now attempting to gaslight me, to make me doubt my own experience. Classic, Dad muttered, shaking his head. She hasn't changed at all. I decided not to return the call. Instead, with Judith's and Dad's support, I made the decision to stay in Seattle permanently. Judith began filing for a change in custody, gathering evidence of Mom's abandonment and financial misconduct. With legal matters in motion, Dad turned his attention to practical concerns. You need clothes, school supplies, whatever personal items you want, he said. We can go shopping today. The shopping trip was surreal. Accustomed to thrift stores, I was overwhelmed by Dad's insistence that I choose whatever I liked, without checking price tags. By the end of the day, I had a new wardrobe, a laptop, and a phone with unlimited data, a sharp contrast to the restricted plan Mom had grudgingly provided. That evening, sitting on the deck overlooking the ocean, Dad and I had our first truly deep conversation about the divorce and the years of separation. Why did you and Mom split up? I asked, the question that had haunted me since I was 8 finally finding its voice. He was quiet for a long moment. The simplest answer is that we wanted different things from life. Your mother wanted financial security and social status above all else. When my first business venture failed, she saw me as a disappointment rather than a partner facing temporary setbacks. And you? I prompted. I wanted a true partnership, someone who would weather the storms with me, not abandon ship at the first sign of rough waters. He looked at me, his eyes sad. I never wanted to leave you, Blanche. That was the hardest part. Your mother used her custody rights as a weapon, gradually restricting my access until I was effectively cut out of your life. As the days passed, we made plans for my future. Dad contacted the best private school in Seattle, arranging for me to start when the fall semester began. A child psychologist was engaged to help me process the abandonment and years of manipulation. Slowly, I began to envision a life where I was valued and supported, rather than merely tolerated. 1 week after arriving in Seattle, Dad and Judith suggested it was time to retrieve my belongings from Mom's house. With her still in Bali for another week, we had the perfect opportunity to enter legally, as I was still officially a resident, and collect my personal items without confrontation. You don't have to come if it would be too difficult, Dad assured me. I can handle it with the legal team. But I knew this was something I needed to do myself. A necessary step in closing that chapter? I want to go, I said firmly. There are things there that matter to me. The decision made, we planned the trip with military precision. Flights booked, legal documents prepared, a moving company engaged. As the date approached, I found myself drafting and redrafting a letter to leave for Mom, trying to find words to express the depth of her betrayal and my decision to forge a new path. 3 days before Mom was scheduled to return, Dad and I, accompanied by Judith and her assistant, arrived at the house. Using my key, I opened the front door to find it exactly as we'd left it, eerily silent, undisturbed. Walking into that space as essentially a visitor was disorienting. Familiar surroundings suddenly felt foreign, as if I were seeing them through new eyes. The photographs on the walls, I noticed for the first time, featured primarily Richard and his children, with Mom occasionally included. There were almost no images of me, and none at all of me with my mother. "Where is your room?" Dad asked quietly, his hand a reassuring presence on my shoulder. I led him upstairs to the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall, the one furthest from the master suite. Opening the door revealed my modest space, neat but impersonal, lacking the touches of indulgence visible in the stepchildren's rooms we'd passed. "This was your room?" Dad's voice held a note of disbelief as he took in the basic furnishings. "It's fine," I said automatically, the defensive response ingrained after years of being told I should be grateful. His expression softened. "No, sweetheart. It's not fine. You deserved better." With the mover's help, we began packing. Clothes into wardrobe boxes, books and school supplies into smaller cartons. I was selective, leaving anything that had been a gift from Mom or Richard, taking only what truly belonged to me or held sentimental value. As I cleared my desk drawers, I found a box of keepsakes I'd almost forgotten. Pushed to the back. Photos from before the divorce. A few birthday cards Dad had sent in the early years. A small teddy bear he'd given me on my 5th birthday. "You kept these," he said, his voice thick with emotion as I showed him the mementos. "I never really believed she was telling the truth about you not caring," I admitted. "Not completely." In my closet, behind a row of shoes, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band, all addressed to me in my father's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened the first one. A birthday card for my 13th birthday, containing a heartfelt message and a gift card that had never been used. One by one, I opened them, each containing evidence of my father's continued efforts to remain in my life, efforts my mother had deliberately hidden. Cards for every birthday and Christmas. A letter explaining his new address and phone number when he moved to Seattle. Photos of him at his company headquarters with a note saying he hoped I'd visit someday. "She kept all of these from me," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "All this time I thought you had forgotten about me." Dad pulled me into a tight embrace. "Never. Not for a single day." As the movers continued, I wandered into Mom's home office, driven by a need to understand why she had gone to such lengths to separate us. Judith had advised that personal documents related to me were legally mine to take, so I searched the filing cabinet. In a folder labeled Divorce, I found financial records confirming what Dad had told me. Monthly child support payments, far larger than what Mom had claimed, deposited regularly into an account I'd never known existed. There were also court documents showing Dad's repeated petitions for visitation, all opposed by Mom with various fabricated excuses. Most damning of all was a draft letter to her attorney, dated around the time she met Richard, outlining a strategy to minimize the father's influence as she integrated into her new partner's life. I was referred to as a complication that needed to be managed carefully to ensure Richard's continued interest. By late afternoon, packing was complete. As the movers loaded the last boxes, I sat at my now empty desk and wrote the letter I'd been composing in my mind for days. "Dear Mom," it began, the formality of mother feeling too distant, the warmth of mommy impossibly out of reach. I poured out my feelings of betrayal, not just from the airport, but from years of being made to feel like an inconvenience. I explained that I'd found the hidden letters and financial records, that I knew the truth about her systematic campaign to keep Dad from me. "I am choosing to live with Dad now," I wrote near the end, not as revenge, but because I deserve to be somewhere I am wanted and valued. "I hope someday you will understand the damage your choices have caused, not just to me, but to yourself. Despite everything, I don't hate you, but I need to love myself enough to leave." I placed the letter on the stripped mattress of what had been my bed, the white paper stark against the bare blue sheet. As a final touch, I left the house key beside it, a symbolic relinquishment of my place in that household. Walking out of that house for the last time, I felt a complex mixture of grief, relief, and resolution. Dad waited by the car, his expression concerned. "All done?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He seemed to understand, opening the car door for me without further questions. As we drove away, I didn't look back. Instead, I looked forward, toward the future I was now free to create. My mother returned from Bali 3 days later. Within hours, my phone exploded. A barrage of increasingly frantic messages. "Where are you? Why is your room empty? Call me immediately. Blanche, this is not funny. Come home right now. I just spoke to your father's lawyer. How could you do this to me after everything I have done for you? Please come home, sweetie. We can work this out. I miss you. The messages cycled through anger, manipulation, and false contrition in a predictable pattern. I showed them to Dad and Judith, who advised me not to respond until the legal proceedings were further along. A week after her return, Mom showed up unannounced at Dad's house, having somehow obtained the address. The security system alerted us to her presence at the gate, her luxury SUV visible on the monitor as she repeatedly pressed the intercom. You don't have to see her, Dad assured me. We can have security turn her away. But I knew this confrontation was inevitable, and perhaps necessary. I'll talk to her, I said, but I want you and Judith there too. Mom's face when the front door opened was a study in conflicting emotions. Relief at finding me battling with outrage at the situation. She wore an expensive sundress and designer sunglasses, pushed up into her perfectly highlighted hair, the picture of affluent suburbia. Blanche, thank God, she exclaimed, stepping forward as if to embrace me. I took an instinctive step back and her arms dropped. What is going on? Why did you leave? Why are you with him? The last word was infused with such venom that I flinched. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, Dad suggested, his voice calm but firm. Once seated in the living room, with Judith present as both legal counsel and witness, Mom's facade began to crack. Her eyes darted around the beautiful space, taking in the obvious wealth. So this is what this is about, she said with a brittle laugh. He's lured you away with promises of luxury. I should have known. That is not why I am here, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. I am here because you abandoned me at an airport. I am here because you have been lying to me about Dad for years. I am here because I found all the letters and cards you hid from me. Her expression faltered, then hardened. You went through my private things? How dare you? They were addressed to me, I countered. They were mine to read. You're 15 years old, she snapped. Everything under my roof belongs to me, including your correspondence. I was protecting you from his inconsistency, his broken promises. Dad, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. There were no broken promises, Karen. Only your systematic efforts to erase me from our daughter's life. You have no right to judge me, she hissed. You have no idea what it was like raising her alone while you were off becoming a millionaire. I sent child support every month, he replied evenly. Far more than the court ordered. Money you apparently spent on yourself while telling Blanche you were struggling. Mom's face flushed. That is a lie. I sacrificed everything for her, including abandoning her at an airport so you could vacation with your new family, Judith interjected, her professional tone making the accusation even more damning. For a moment, Mom seemed at a loss for words. Then her eyes narrowed as she turned back to me. I didn't abandon you. I gave you an opportunity for independence. If you had just gone home as instructed, none of this drama would have been necessary. The blatant rewriting of reality made my chest tight with anger. You left me alone at an international airport with $200 and no house key. You didn't tell me to go home until you were walking away. You didn't answer my calls or texts. How is that an opportunity? You're twisting what happened, she insisted, though her voice had lost some conviction. Dad leaned forward. Karen, we have security footage from the airport. We have witness statements from airline staff, and we have the text messages you sent Blanche after the fact, trying to cover your tracks. Thea, color drained from my mother's face. You're building a case against me? You want to take my daughter and throw me in jail too after everything we meant to each other? This is not about punishment, Judith explained. This is about establishing what is in Blanche's best interest going forward. She has expressed a clear desire to live with her father, and given the circumstances, the court is highly likely to honor that wish. Mom's composure crumbled entirely. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to me. Blanche, please, I made a mistake. I was wrong. But you can't leave me for him. We're a family. We stopped being a family when you decided Richard and his children were more important than me, I said quietly. Maybe even before that, when you started lying about Dad. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. Then what was it like, I asked. Help me understand why you would hide Dad's letters, lie about child support, and then abandon me for a vacation. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Apparently unable to formulate a justification even she could believe. Finally, she whispered, "Richard thought it would be better if you stayed home. He said the resort was really for adults and his children, who were used to that lifestyle." I was afraid of losing him. The raw honesty was somehow more painful than her earlier manipulations. "So you chose him over me?" "I chose financial security," she countered. "Do you have any idea what it is like to be a single mother with no money?" "Richard offered us a better life." "He offered you a better life," I corrected. "I was just excess baggage." Before she could respond, the front door opened and Richard strode in, his face tight with anger. "Karen, this has gone on long enough." "Get in the car now!" Dad stood immediately. "How did you get past security?" Richard ignored him, focusing on Mom. "I told you not to come here. You're just making things worse. Our lawyer said not to have any contact." Mom seemed to shrink under his gaze, her brief moment of honesty evaporating as she reverted to the compliant wife. "I just wanted to see Blanche." "And now you have," he said dismissively. "Let's go." As Mom rose to follow him, I called after her. "Is this really what you want, Mom? Someone who treats you like a child and me like an inconvenience?" She paused, conflict evident in her expression, but Richard took her elbow firmly. "The car, Karen. Now." The last image I had of my mother that day was her back as she walked away, just as it had been at the airport. But this time I wasn't the one being left behind. In the aftermath, Dad's legal team filed for a restraining order after Richard tried to enter the property again the next day. The court granted it, and a temporary custody arrangement was put in place pending a full hearing. The hardest part was accepting that my mother had chosen her new life over me, not just once at the airport, but repeatedly over the years, with each hidden letter and each lie about my father. The girl who had once believed she was the center of her mother's world had to confront the painful reality that she had been, at best, an afterthought. The months following Mom's dramatic visit were challenging but transformative. Adjusting to life with Dad meant creating new routines, establishing boundaries, and learning to trust that his presence was permanent. I started seeing Dr. Eleanor Wilson, a therapist specializing in adolescent trauma and parental abandonment. Our weekly sessions provided a safe space to process the complex emotions surrounding Mom's betrayal and the years of manipulation. "What you are feeling is entirely normal," Dr. Wilson assured me during one difficult session. "Anger, grief, relief, guilt, they can all coexist. Healing is not linear." With her guidance, I began to understand that Mom's actions reflected her own brokenness, rather than my worth. This didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me carry the burden with less self-blame. "People who are whole don't abandon their children," Dr. Wilson explained. "Your mother's choices speak to her limitations, not yours." Dad enrolled me in Westlake Academy, one of Seattle's premier private schools, for my sophomore year. The transition was exciting and intimidating. After years of being an outsider in Richard's home, I was wary of new connections. But to my surprise, I found myself making genuine friends for the first time in years. Zoe and Aiden, twins who shared my love of literature, adopted me into their group with an ease that felt almost suspicious at first. Haley, a gifted artist who recognized my tentative attempts at sketching, offered to teach me during lunch. Slowly, I began to lower my defenses, allowing these new friends glimpses of my true self. "You're different from when you first came here," Zoe commented one afternoon. "Less guarded." "I guess I'm learning that not everyone has an agenda," I replied, the insight surprising even me. Building a relationship with Dad was a delicate dance of rediscovery. We were simultaneously getting to know each other as we were now, and reconciling memories of who we had been. Sometimes the past and present aligned perfectly, like when he remembered my childhood love of stargazing and installed a telescope on the deck. Other times, the years of separation created unexpected gaps, moments of disconnect that reminded us of all we'd missed. "I wish I had been there for your first day of middle school," he said one evening as we looked through photos. "Your science fair projects, your first crush." "We can't get those years back," I told him, surprising myself with the role reversal, me comforting him. "But we have now and the future." He squeezed my hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. "When did you get so wise?" "Trauma has its benefits," I joked, the dark humor a sign of my gradual healing. 6 months after I moved in with Dad, the court granted him full legal custody. Mom, represented by an expensive attorney Richard had hired, fought the decision initially, but eventually agreed after Judith presented the overwhelming evidence of abandonment and financial misconduct. The judge ordered Mom to repay the misappropriated child support funds and established a structured visitation schedule that would begin only after I completed a certain number of joint therapy sessions with her. It was more consideration than she deserved, in my opinion, but Dad gently reminded me that maintaining some relationship might be important to my long-term emotional health. You can be angry with her, even hate what she did, without severing the connection completely, he advised. But the choice is ultimately yours. I'll support whatever you decide. I agreed to the joint therapy, though the first few sessions were excruciating. Mom vacillated between tearful apologies and subtle attempts to justify her actions. Her narrative had shifted from denying abandonment to framing it as a misguided attempt to please Richard, as if that somehow made it less damaging. I just wanted us to have security, she repeated often. So you made sure I ended up alone at an airport instead? I responded during one particularly tense session. Over time, I established firm boundaries. I would not return to live with her, regardless of promises or emotional appeals. I would not pretend the past hadn't happened. I would not allow her to rewrite our history to ease her guilt. These terms were non-negotiable, and slowly she seemed to accept them. Dad remained remarkably neutral throughout this process, never speaking ill of Mom despite everything. When I asked him about this restraint, his answer stayed with me. Hating her would only hurt you, he explained. You are half her, whether we like it or not. Besides, she gave me you. And for that, I can forgive almost anything. The first holiday season with Dad and his extended family, grandparents and cousins I barely remembered, was a revelation. The genuine warmth and inclusion I experienced stood in stark contrast to the performative dinners at Richard's house, where I'd always felt like an unwelcome guest. My paternal grandmother, a vibrant woman in her 70s, pulled me aside during Christmas dinner. You have your father's resilience, she told me, her eyes crinkling with affection, and his heart. But that spark, that fire when you talk about things that matter to you, that is all your own. High school graduation came 3 years later. Dad beamed with pride as I delivered the valedictorian address. Mom attended, sitting awkwardly in the row behind Dad and his parents. Our relationship had evolved into something cordial, if not close, built on careful honesty rather than the false harmony she would have preferred. College took me to the East Coast, where I pursued a degree in psychology with a minor in family law. The distance from both parents allowed me to define myself beyond the dynamics of their divorce and the drama of my teenage years. I discovered passions and strengths I might never have recognized had my life continued on its previous path. In my junior year, I interned with a nonprofit supporting children of divorce, using my experience to help others navigate similar challenges. This work eventually led to my career path, developing programs for family courts to better consider children's needs during custody proceedings. The journey toward forgiveness was long and nonlinear. Some days, the memory of my mother's casual shrug as she abandoned me at the airport still had the power to steal my breath. Other days, I could acknowledge her humanity, her flaws, and her limited capacity with compassion rather than bitterness. Forgiveness does not mean what happened was okay, my therapist had explained years earlier. It means you are choosing not to let it consume your future. On my 25th birthday, I wrote Mom a letter expressing this hard-won understanding. I have learned that people can only give what they have within themselves to give, I wrote. Your capacity for unconditional love was damaged long before I came along. Recognizing this has freed me from expecting what you could never provide. Her response was surprisingly self-aware. You deserved better than what I could be as a mother, she wrote back. I am sorry for that every day. When I married at 28, my father walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes. From the moment you called me from that airport, all I wanted was to see you happy and whole, he whispered before giving my hand to my soon-to-be husband. Look at you now. Mom attended the wedding with her new partner, Richard, long gone after their eventual divorce. She participated appropriately, but without attempting to claim credit for the woman I had become, a restraint that reflected her own growth over the years. As I built my own family, I carried forward the lessons from both parents, a roadmap of what to emulate and what to avoid. From my father, I learned the patient persistence of true love and the courage to begin again after loss. From my mother, I learned the importance of self-sufficiency and the danger of placing status above authentic connection. The airport abandonment, which once defined me, gradually became just one chapter in a much longer story. A pivotal moment, certainly, but not the conclusion. In an unexpected way, being left behind had propelled me forward, forcing me to discover strengths I might otherwise never have recognized. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my mother had taken me to Bali that day, if she had chosen me over Richard's preferences. Would I still be caught in the cycle of seeking her conditional approval? Would I have discovered my father's unwavering love? Would I have found my voice and purpose? These questions have no answers. Life offers no parallel versions to compare with the path we actually walk. All I know with certainty is that families are defined not by biology or legal documents, but by the consistent choice to show up, to value, to prioritize one another. My father taught me that. My mother, in her absence, confirmed it. If you've ever felt abandoned or betrayed by someone who should have protected you, know this. Your worth was never determined by their failure. Their limitations are not your destiny. Family can be found and created in unexpected places if you remain open to connection, even after heartbreak. What would you have done if you were left at that airport? Have you ever had to choose your own path when someone else tried to define it for you? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to hear your stories.